Are humans primarily aggressive animals, held in check only by structures of authority, or is an innate moral sense and capacity for peace also a part of our nature? Frans de Waal, the renowned primatologist famous for his study of the behavior of our two closest living primate relatives, the chimpanzee and the bonobo, provides some interesting insights on this question, some of which we will explore in this video. According to de Waal, in the latter half of the 20th century, a theory of human nature emerged which remains dominant to the present day. This theory, which de Waal called the veneer theory, proposes that in our distant evolutionary past we were killer apes. Driven by aggressive drives, cruelty, murder, and war were common occurrences. These aggressive drives continue to live on within us according to this theory and are held in check only by the existence of moral codes and laws enforced by religious and state institutions. When these institutions falter or become corrupt themselves, as occurred in numerous countries in the 20th century, the aggressive drives of human beings, according to the veneer theory, will be let loose and man will be unconsciously driven to commit destructive acts against his fellow man. As the old Latin phrase puts it, homo homini lupus, man is a wolf to man. In his book Our Inner Ape, Frans de Waal explained the reasoning behind this theory. This veneer theory, as I call it, became a dominant theme in the post-war discussion. Deep down, we humans are violent and amoral. A stream of popular books explored this issue by proposing that we have an uncontainable aggressive drive that seeks an outlet in warfare, violence, and even sports. Another theory was that our aggressiveness is novel, that we are the only primates that kill their own kind. Our species never had the time to evolve the appropriate inhibitions. As a result, we don't have our fighting instinct under control as much as professional predators like wolves or lions. We're stuck with a violent temper that we're ill-equipped to master. The veneer theory of human nature was strengthened in the eyes of many scientists, not only by the savagery committed in the totalitarian states of the 20th century, but also by the insights emerging from the study of evolution and primatology. In the 20th century, it was discovered that our genome is 98.7% similar to the chimpanzee, rendering it our close evolutionary cousin. The human lineage and the pan lineage, which the modern chimpanzee belongs to, diverged from each other approximately 5.5 million years ago, meaning that we share a common ancestor with the chimpanzee. Therefore, in examining the behavior of the chimpanzee, de Waal explains, we can find clues to help us better understand the human species' distant past. While the existence of the chimpanzee has been known since the 17th century, it was long believed to be a totally peaceful animal. Close observation of chimpanzees in the 20th century, both in the wild and in captivity, dramatically changed this perception. While chimpanzees are often relatively peaceful creatures, they also have a violent streak and are capable of horrific acts of cruelty against their own kind. Given their enormous territories, de Waal wrote, violent incidents between chimp communities are rarely witnessed. The few instances that have been seen leave little doubt, though, that we're dealing with targeted, deliberate killing, in other words, murder. The chimps acted almost the way they do toward prey, treating the enemy as if it belonged to another species. One attacker might pin down the victim, sitting on his head, holding his legs, while others bit, hit, and pounded. They would twist off a limb, rip out a trachea, remove fingernails, literally drink blood pouring from wounds, and in general not let up until their victim stopped moving. There are reports of attackers returning to the scene weeks later, seemingly to check on the outcome of their efforts. This frightening behavior, sadly, is not unlike that of our own species. As knowledge of the chimpanzee's violent streak spread in the late 20th century, adherents of the veneer theory were forced to slightly modify their conception of human nature. Previously, it was thought that humans were the only animal to engage in the murder and torture of their own kind, but observations of chimps forced scientists to reassess their ideas. Perhaps, they reasoned, the capacity for cruelty is not uniquely human, but a part of our evolutionary lineage, and thus an instinctual endowment of all primates. The discovery of the aggressive traits of chimps has contributed to the popularity of the veneer theory within the scientific community. But as de Waal convincingly argues, To focus too much on our capacity for violence, a capacity we share with chimpanzees, is to myopically distort our nature. For along with a capacity for immense cruelty, we are also highly empathic animals, and unlike the xenophobic chimpanzee, we have the ability to cultivate peace and harmony with individuals belonging to groups or tribes different from our own. As de Waal wrote, "It's hardly surprising that scientists emphasizing man's violent side have flocked to the chimpanzee as Exhibit A. The parallels are undeniable and disturbing. Though one aspect of human behavior that the chimp cannot illuminate is something we do even more than wage war: maintain peace. Peace is common among human societies, as is the trading of goods, the sharing of river water, and intermarriage. Here chimps have nothing to tell us, since they lack any friendly ties between groups. All they know is varying degrees of hostility. This means that to understand human intergroup relations at a primal level, we need to look beyond the chimpanzee as an ancestral model. Luckily, such an alternative ancestral model is known to us today. Discovered in 1929, the bonobo is as close to us genetically as the chimpanzee, as both belong to the Pan lineage. However, recent studies on the muscular system of bonobos suggest that as a species they have undergone less transformation over time than chimpanzees, and therefore may resemble the common ancestor we share with them to a greater degree than the modern chimpanzee. In contrast to the highly xenophobic chimpanzee, peaceful intermingling among different bonobo groups is a common occurrence. Among bonobos, empathic behavior is the norm, and as de Waal wrote, "There's no deadly warfare, little hunting, no male dominance, and enormous amounts of sex." The bonobo's existence, in other words, is highly gregarious and peaceful, thus putting serious doubt into the widely accepted idea that our lineage is characterized primarily by aggression and warfare. As de Waal explained, bonobos fail to fit established notions about human nature. Believe me, if studies had found that they massacre one another, everyone would know about bonobos. Their peacefulness is the real problem. I sometimes try to imagine what would have happened if we'd known about the bonobo first and the chimpanzee only later or not at all. The discussion about human evolution might not revolve as much around violence, warfare, and male dominance, but rather around sexuality, empathy, caring, and cooperation. What a different intellectual landscape we would occupy. While chimpanzees and bonobos in some fundamental ways are completely different from each other, we are in a sense like them both. They display to us our dual nature. Being both more systematically brutal than chimps, wrote de Waal, and more empathic than bonobos, we are by far the most bipolar ape. The bipolarity of our nature means that the development and behavioral patterns of humans can vary on a wide spectrum. Through cultural and developmental influences, as well as through self-awareness and conscious willpower, human beings are capable of cultivating the more positive side of our nature, becoming promoters of the good, or they can allow the destructive forces within them to flourish and become creators of suffering and pain. While our biology, in the words of the American biologist Edward Wilson, holds us on a leash and only lets us stray so far from who we really are, the range of who we can become on an individual and social level is wide and ranging. But while we are held on a leash by our evolved predispositions, we are not predetermined, like the chimpanzee, to be violent and aggressive, nor predetermined to be peaceful and gregarious like the bonobo. Instead, as bipolar animals full of contradictions and potentials, it is more accurate to say we are still in the process of figuring out who we are, as well as who we want to become. In other words, as Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, when thinking about human nature, it is best to consider ourselves as the as-yet undetermined animal.